welcome to Health. Today we are talking about a concept called the reverse golden rule, which encourages individuals to treat themselves with the same kindness and compassion they would extend to a loved one. This approach, rooted in the idea of self-compassion, counters the tendency towards self-criticism and promotes emotional well-being.
All right, get ready because today we're diving into something I think a lot of us can relate to, but with a twist.
A twist on a classic.
Yeah. And I'll admit, when I saw the topic and all the research you sent over, I get a little,
Nervous.
maybe just a little. It's like, are we about to expose some deep-seated hypocrisy in how we treat ourselves versus everyone else?
Well, that's the fascinating thing about this whole reverse golden rule concept, right? It makes you hold up a mirror to that inner voice.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't had the pleasure of unpacking this little gem, what are we talking about here?
In a nutshell, imagine taking that whole treat others principle and turning it inward. So instead of just focusing on how we treat everyone else.
Which, let's be real, is usually easier said than done some days.
Yeah, totally. But the reverse golden rule is about taking that same compassion, that same understanding we so readily offer others, and applying it to ourselves.
Oh, so when I completely bomb that presentation at work, instead of replaying every cringeworthy moment on a loop in my head.
Which, let's be honest, is often our default setting.
Tell me about it. But instead we're supposed to give ourselves the same pep talk we give our best friend. Hey, everyone has those days, you'll crush it next time kind of thing.
You've basically got it. And it's not just some feel-good self-help mantra either. A lot of the research you sent over, especially the work by John Matthews, a psychotherapist, suggests this isn't just about feeling a little bad versus feeling a little better. This stuff gets kind of deep.
How so?
Well, he calls harsh self-criticism a form of, get this, emotional abuse. And he backs it up with some pretty compelling neuroscience, showing how that constant negativity can literally rewire our brains.
Wait, for real? My inner critic is basically reshaping my gray matter for more meltdowns. Mm-hmm. That's both terrifying and weirdly validating.
It's like explaining why it's so easy to spiral into self-doubt, even over the smallest things. Matthews talks about how our brains have this negativity bias hardwired to latch onto the bad stuff.
Makes sense, evolutionarily speaking. Back in the day, focusing on what could kill you probably kept you alive. Not so much these days.
Exactly. So knowing all of that, how do we even begin to apply this reverse golden rule thing? Because honestly, sometimes just getting through the day without a mental meltdown feels like a win.
Right, so is this whole thing just about throwing ourselves a pity party every time something goes wrong? Asking for a friend, obviously.
Not at all. It's about recognizing when you're being unfair to yourself and choosing a different approach, a more supportive inner dialogue, if you will. And luckily, a lot of the articles you sent over provide some pretty practical steps for doing just that.
I'm all ears because, while this whole be kinder to yourself thing sounds lovely in theory, actually putting it into practice, that's the real challenge.
Absolutely. And that's where we'll dig into some specific techniques and strategies. So one of the first things a lot of your sources emphasize is the importance of awareness. We need to actually catch ourselves in the act of, being our own worst critics. Because half the time, those negative thoughts are running on autopilot. We don't even question them. We just accept them as fact. I always mess things up, or I'm never going to be good enough. That kind of stuff. John Matthews, the psychotherapist we mentioned earlier, calls these thought traps. And he offers this really cool framework for how to, dismantle them. And the first step, he says, is to actually identify those thoughts when they pop up. He even suggests asking yourself a few questions.
Okay, hit me with the questions. I am so ready to put my inner critic on trial.
Well, one that really resonated with me, it's deceptively simple, but he asks, is this thought positive, neutral, or negative? And you'd think that's so basic, but you'd be surprised how often we just let those negative thoughts slide right on by.
Oh, for sure. We don't even bat an eye. They just set up camp in our brains and wreak havoc.
Right. So once you've identified a thought as negative, Matthews says, don't let it off the hook just yet. The next question is this really true? Is there any actual evidence to support this self-sabotaging story I'm telling myself?
So it's we're demanding proof. Show me the receipts, inner critic.
Yes. And often you'll find that the evidence just isn't there. Or even better, it might even point in the opposite direction.
Okay, so what happens if we're really struggling to find evidence to support our inner critic's claims? What if those negative thoughts are super convincing?
That's where Matthew suggests considering alternative explanations. He encourages us to ask, is there another way to look at this situation?
Oh, I like that. Because we can get so stuck in those extreme ways of thinking, right? It's either I'm a total failure or I'm a raging success. No in between.
And that's where the reverse golden rule comes in handy. It's not about denying our mistakes or pretending we're perfect. It's about recognizing that everyone makes mistakes. It's how we treat ourselves in those moments of imperfection that really matters.
It's like we're learning to befriend our inner critic instead of constantly battling it, right? So instead of you messed up again, it's more like, hey, we all make mistakes. Let's figure out what happened and how we can learn from it.
Exactly. We're shifting from self-judgment to self-compassion, from a drill sergeant mentality to like a supportive coach who's got your back, even when you fumble the ball.
And the more we practice this, the easier it gets, right? It's like building any other habit.
Exactly. It's a journey, not a destination. We're not going to achieve some perfect state of self-love overnight. But with each conscious effort, we strengthen that self-compassion muscle. And remember what we were talking about earlier? About how harsh self-criticism actually impacts our brains?
Well, the cool thing is, the reverse is true as well.
Oh, tell me more. Does this mean I can literally rewire my brain for more self-love?
The more we practice self-compassion, the more we rewire our brains for resilience, emotional regulation, and even stronger relationships.
Okay, now that's what I call the win-win. Less self-criticism, more self-acceptance, and better relationships. Sign me up. What else have you got for me? It's like we're finally tossing out that old self-help book that just made us feel worse, you know? The one with all the shame and shoulds.
Yeah, we're trading it in for something a little more supportive. Right. Like imagine a self-help book titled Be Your Own Best Friend. Still about growth and all that, but from a place of kindness, not constant criticism.
And you know, one thing that really stood out from the articles he sent, this whole self-compassion thing, it's not just about us.
Oh, you mean how it impacts our relationships with others? For sure.
It's like that saying, hurt people, but flipped, right? Like, the more at peace we are with ourselves, the more forgiving we are of our own stumbles, the more we're able to extend that same grace to those around us.
Makes sense. If you're not constantly battling your own inner critic, you've got so much more mental and emotional energy to actually be present with others, to offer support, to understand when they mess up too.
Exactly. And it's not even something we have to try to force, you know, it just kind of naturally spills over.
It's like we become this like walking, talking example of the reverse golden rule. Not just talking the talk, but actually living it. And maybe even inspiring a few people along the way.
Right. So as we wrap up here, it really boils down to this, doesn't it? If the way we talk to ourselves, that constant barrage of criticism, if that's something we would never dream of saying to someone we love, isn't it time to rethink that whole internal dialogue?
Isn't it though? Seriously. Imagine if we all committed to treating ourselves with even a fraction of the kindness we offer others. The world would be a very different place.
Now that's a thought worth pondering.
It really is. And on that note, I think we'll leave it there for today. But seriously, folks, take care of yourselves out there. Be kind to yourselves. And until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Welcome to Health. If you would like to create a podcast like this, be sure to visit Google Notebook LM. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe for more. Leave a comment if you have an idea for an episode that we should start researching. Thank you for listening.